Good afternoon, Civilization fans, and welcome to the Firaxis livestream. My name is Pete Murray. I'm going to be your host today. Happy Valentine's Day to you joining us. And I'm joined today by Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson, our historian for Civilization, and our lead designer, Ed Beach, as usual. Andrew, we've worked together for years, and this is absolutely the first time I've screwed up your name. I apologize for that. So, good news, Civ fans. We have lots of things to show you today. We want to talk about our leaders of China, which we've released recently, and then we're going to take an opportunity to show you the leaders of the Sahara from our most recent DLC. Let's take a minute and talk about our China leaders. So we've got 3 leaders to show you off in this. We've got Wu Zetian, an alternate persona for Qin Shi Huang, and we've got Yang Liu. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at our rulers of China.
Yang Liu, Wu Zetian, and Qin Shi Huang are the rulers of China in Sid Meier's Civilization VI. Born the second son of the Hongwu Emperor, Zhu Di won a 3-year war to assert his legitimacy, proclaiming himself the Yongle Emperor. During his rule, he expanded outward, gathering support and foreign gold for what was to become China's quintessential empire. Yonglu's leader ability is Li Jia, which gives cities a project that converts 100% of their production into gold, or 50% either into food or faith. Cities with more than 10 population receive extra gold, science, and culture per turn based on that city's population. Leverage Yonglu's city projects in your early cities to supercharge their growth and buy what you need with gold or faith. Consider changing production away from projects and towards wonders like the Hanging Garden once they get big enough to start producing extra yields. While Yonglu aims to build the tallest towers, Wu Zetian rules China's courts from the shadows. The first and only woman to sit on China's throne, Wu Zetian rose to power via assassinations, manipulation, and cunning court strategy. She also guided Chinese politics towards a more meritocratic system and away from noble patronage. Her unique leader ability is Manual of Entrapment, which allows her spies to operate 1 level higher and gives her extra science and culture for every successful offensive spy mission. She also receives a free spy after discovering defensive tactics. Use your early spy against your greatest threats to maximize the impact of her ability, as well as to even the score with your rivals. Stealing great works can get you culture fast, while stealing a technology might just get you the science to finish your own. If courting the favor of dignitaries isn't your style, Unifier Qin has a much more direct approach. Qin Shi Huang earned the title of the first emperor of China through a bloody 20-year campaign against 6 other major Chinese states. Unifier Qin's unique leader ability is 36 stratagems, which grant all melee units the Convert Barbarian action. Turn a single warrior into an unstoppable army with Unifier Qin, then send your waves of fresh troops to wash over enemy cities. Since most of your units can be acquired without production, focus on building wonders for Eureka's and inspirations, and to further boost your military might. Whether from the busy streets, the royal courts, or the barbarian outskirts, how will you rule China in Civilization VI?
So there are our new leaders of China. So now we've got some different dynasties represented, don't we? We've got Wu Zetian from the Tang Dynasty. We've got Yang Liu from the Ming Dynasty, right? And everybody loves Yang Liu. We've been seeing people play, and we've seen just everybody having a wonderful time with him in that. And then we've got Qin Shi Huang and his alternate persona. And then, Ed, you were telling me you had seen some amazing gameplay using Qin.
Yeah, so we wanted to give a shout out to our community. We didn't have a live stream for the China leaders, and I don't think we actually really needed to popularize the live stream, the leaders with a live stream, because our community has done such a fantastic job of talking about and presenting and showing streams with these leaders. One of the most interesting ones was Bosius, who was able to go ahead and have a stream where he gave himself the challenge to try to win a civilization game without using a singular settler founding any cities anywhere in his empire. So we just saw in the video that amazing ability that Qin Shi Huang with the new alternate persona has to convert barbarians to his own cause by using up one of his regular military units to do it. Normally in the game, that ability is something like a religious unit might have, something like that. So he can do that with any military units. He can build up an army very quickly. Boethius challenged himself to do that in the zombie mode of the game, where the zombies are considered barbarians as well. So there's just this huge opportunity to get this massive steamrolling effect. And so he found the right camps. I was just watching this the other day, and soon had an army that could take on Dido, conquered her empire, and just rolled to victory from there.
So congratulations to him. So we're going to talk today about the leaders of the Sahara. So this is fun. Andrew, we've got the opportunity to talk about our first leader, and this is Ramses. So if you know one Egyptian pharaoh, you know Tutankhamun. If you know two of them, you know Ramses.
Right, and Ramses is probably the most significant pharaoh of the most significant time period in Egyptian history, in the New Kingdom. And it's worthwhile to take a moment and just think about the scale of history here. So Ramses lived about 3,200 years ago, and the pyramids, if we think of those as the iconic Egyptian structures, those were already 1,500 years old by the time Ramses was born. It's going to be another 1,200 years from Ramses to Cleopatra, and then of course 2,000 to us. And when we see the scale, even of when we break it apart into different kingdoms, any history of the United States or other nations oftentimes will just look like a tiny flicker of light in just the scale of time here. Egypt is really something else.
It's pretty amazing. So let's take a look at our game where we're playing as Ramses right now. So Ed, what's the situation that we're looking at in the game right now?
Okay, so we're 24 turns into the game, but boy, a lot has happened already. We were able to go just exploring around the map, found a goodie hut that had a relic in it. The relic was able to provide us the faith we needed to get a pantheon established. The pantheon we chose, very appropriate for Ramses, is the Monument to the Gods pantheon, so we get plus 15% towards building wonders early in the game. And so we're off and running with the Ramses type of gameplay. So let's look at Ramses' ability. And it is named after his great monuments built at Abu Simbel, up the Nile River from his capital, which is Thebes. It's a different capital than we have when you're playing as Cleopatra. So what Ramses allows you to do is get a large chunk of culture based on following along with construction projects in your cities. So you put a building up, you get 15% of its cost back in culture. If you're doing a wonder, you get 30% of that towards you in just sort of a massive lump sum. So what we're going to do right now is show the fact that we have been working on the Hanging Gardens here in Thebes, just across the river, and we are just a few turns away from completing that. When we complete that, we're going to take a massive jump in terms of our civic progress. We also have met a neighbor, was it Setien, who is to the south. So I don't think she's going to bother us much, but what we want to do is we want to make sure we propel ourselves to a golden age, because with a golden age we can do things like use faith and gold to buy workers and so forth. So what we're going to do is progress here, take out some of the nearby barbarians, and establish Ramses with 2 or 3 wonders to see how far we can power his culture up.
Gotcha. So while Ed's doing that, historically, we don't have a ruler in Civilization VI who's in roughly the time frame of Ramses, right?
No, you've got to go a ways back before you hit Gilgamesh in the sort of dawn of history and in Sumeria, and you've got to go just about 1,000 years into the future before you hit Cyrus, who's the next kind of candidate in history. So there's not a good historical pairing for Ramses here, although regionally, Egypt in his time period made incursions down into Kush, which is Nubia, and who's also in our game. But Amenhotep is much later.
She's later, yep.
Much later. Yes.
But the world of the Bronze Age that Ramses was living in, it was a pretty dynamic time. I mean, there were superpowers, there were regional powers. It was a world connected by trade.
Yeah, we oftentimes think about worlds going from less to more complexity, and that's just not how history usually works. So the thing about bronze is that you can't just mine bronze out of the ground.
Nope.
Bronze is an alloy of copper and tin and sometimes some other things put in. So you need to get sources of all of these different metals together in order to produce what can be oftentimes a very sharp, very durable, very long-lasting thing. And to do that, you need stable trade networks, you need empires, or you need some kind of assurance of safety. That existed at this time until it didn't.
So it's perfectly fine to be a warlord, expecting your bronze from Cyprus and your tin from somewhere in what's going to one day become Afghanistan. But as soon as those trade routes get disrupted because the Hittites have decided to have a civil war for some reason, the world gets a lot more unstable at that point.
Right, and you mentioned the Hittites. That's a group that lives in used to live in Western Turkey right now, and the Hittites were Ramses' biggest rivals in the region.
And we know a lot about how they went to war together because, as you were saying, one of the first peace treaties, the first recorded peace treaty is between Ramses and the Hittites.
And one of the best documented, one of the first documented ancient battles was between 2-man Egyptian chariots and 3-man Hittite chariots, where the Egyptians were able to outmaneuver and outflank the Hittites. The battle ended up being a draw, but the Egyptians had demonstrated that they could field an army all the way out in Syria and fight the regional power to a draw. So this is really when we start to see the beginnings of diplomacy, the beginnings of international relations as a historical feature.
And you've got kings writing to each other in different parts of the world. My brother, send me ivory and send me gold, and I will send you copper, and I will send you my daughter, or conquered slaves or whatever. I mean, and we have records of these. I think that's the amazing part of this world, that we still are able to see glimpses of it years later.
Yeah.
I remember one of my one of the happiest times I had representing our games. I was actually at our Paris office, which is very close to the Louvre downtown, and I had a couple of hours evening available. And I was lucky. I was the one night the Louvre is open late, and I was able to go and see the Egyptian wing of the Louvre and what they have on there. And again, you get a sense of this span of time that's evolved. You've got artifacts that are 3,500 years old and still recognizably Egyptian, and share continuity with things that are coming from a Roman Egyptian era.
Understanding that these objects are touched and known and built and created by humans so long ago is really affecting.
All right, so Ed, you just built the Hanging Garden. So
we did, and we were working on a military tradition civic, and I believe it should be complete once we come out of the screen. Now we're finding out something interesting about Wu Zetian in this game, because normally she has an agenda that is related to espionage, I believe, and we have triggered a different agenda. This is obviously the random agenda that's been assigned to her, and she obviously is worried about us becoming the preeminent builder of wonders in this particular world, something that we normally do associate with a Chinese ruler, but not with her.
She won the first time.
Right, so it just happened that she got his agenda. The Chinese-ness just is seeping from ruler to ruler, and we're going ahead and seeing it come out with her as well.
Okay, so we have a question from chat. Donovan Creed wants to know where Ramses got those sweet gains from. Has he been working out with Gilgamesh?
Ramses does creatine, and he generally lifts on Thursdays. Leg days is on Fridays, depending on the flood of the Nile.
Tune into our social media channels for his progress and his particular workout. I think you'll find it absolutely amazing. So we're going to continue to keep going here. So Ed, what have we got going on?
So what we're
next?
going to do now is we're going to try to put a couple more wonders in place, which I think we're in good shape. We cleared a barbarian camp, so we're in good shape for our golden age. We've already accomplished that. So we're going to go ahead and put Etemenanke here near Thebes. We'll end up with two wonders next to each other, which will make for a great place for a theater square. We've already pinned that out.
Yep.
And then in Racadet, we are about to finish a granary, and then we'll get the Great Bath started there.
Sounds fantastic. So Pablo Sepulveda from YouTube wants to know, what is the language that Ramses is speaking in-game?
Yeah, it's always difficult to let's kind of resurrect dead languages for the purposes of the game. Ramses is speaking the dialect of ancient Egyptian that was present during the New Kingdom.
Okay.
So getting that language down involves bringing in scholars. speak some things, but ancient Egyptian is not one of them.
Yeah.
So getting scholars in, having dialect coaches and things like that, and you know, recruiting actors from areas. Sometimes that helps. In this case, it's that, again, the scale of time is such that you really sort of have to recreate the language.
That's pretty amazing.
Now, Andrew, you were also, not only are you the historian doing the research, but you do all or most of the the scripts for the leaders. So I think it would be actually great if you could, as we go through some of the gameplay, we'll see some of these leaders. We pretty much have leaders only from the leader pass that we're showing here today. I'm not sure whether you remember what you were thinking when you wrote some of these lines, or what your process is for writing that, but anything you could share with that
Sure,
along those lines
I
would
can
be
tell you
great.
about the personalities here. I mean, Ramses is, he ruled until the age of 90, from his teenage years to the age of 90. He's a person who never knew anything except command. And you should feel that radiating off from him. He should be a little arrogant, a little haughty,
And that's something that you develop for our animation teams, is you not only give them a historical background and kind of figure out what their in-game persona is going to be, but you try to make sure that that's clear to the animation team so that they know how to have a portrayal of them that reflects exactly what we want to go for.
And sometimes there's some, so Wu Zetian here is, we could say Caesar. Caesar, there's some jokes in there. He talks about how much he trusts his friends and how they would never betray him. So there's some liberties I take with that.
Yep.
Wu Zetian has gotten a rather bad reputation in Chinese history as being a kind of a poisoner and deceiver and treacherous person. And we sort of have
Let's try
double
sending
down
her
on
a
that.
delegation and
Yeah.
see what her response is.
It's funny. Powerful women rulers sometimes get that reputation after they're out of power.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. Nearly all of your delegation have returned intact. That's a good line. That's a good line. That's a good line.
90%.
Which
Yeah.
folks are we missing? Well, a couple, I guess.
Or
So-
which parts of folks are we missing?
Yeah, so we got a couple of questions that have come in. So Fleur von Conspicua from YouTube has asked, what is Ramses' agenda? It's called Ma'at. He is exploitative. He wants to clear all of the features and improve all the possible tiles. And this is almost the opposite of the Maori's conservationist bias, where they want to keep as many things intact as they possibly can. And then you were telling me Ma'at is the Egyptian term for...
The sort of magical power, especially that resides in kings, the force that flows through the world and makes it prosperous and develop, makes it kind of yield benefit for people, and especially the king and the priests as vessels and vehicles through which Ma'at flows.
Excellent. So Gabrielle Aganan from YouTube is saying, if you buy buildings, Ed, do you still get this bonus of returned culture?
And let's look at, I was in the middle of the turn.
Ancient era is almost over.
I believe it is only with constructing, but let's try it, because I think we have 265 gold.
Surely somebody needs a monument?
Or a granary, yes. So we are one turn from drama and poetry. We'll go into the city. We'll buy a monument. And
there
looks
it goes.
like it does work just fine.
It does.
There we go.
Fantastic. All right, so the question is, so why does Ramesses have this ability to generate culture? This is from Lone Eagle 7 on Twitch. What was the inspiration for giving him a culture bonus based on buildings in the game?
Ramses is one of these leaders that you can do anything with.
Right.
He is a diplomat, he is a war leader, he is a naval power. Egypt is a naval power at that time, as well as a chariot-based power. You can do anything here. What struck me about Ramses is the legacy of construction that is there in places like Abu Simbel, as well as sort of colossal architecture all throughout Egypt. So we could really choose, and this fit.
I think he almost had a legacy of being one of those people who would stamp his name anywhere he could possibly find on monuments. And I believe there's some controversy maybe that he's even wiped out some of his predecessors to stamp his name even more firmly on some of those buildings. So to my mind, he's all about proclaiming his magnificence and establishing his culture and his rule through what he's able to put up as permanent monuments to himself.
The Percy Shelley poem Ozymandias is
Yeah.
about Ramses.
It's
That's
about
his name in
Ramses.
Greek.
Yeah, that's right. And speaking of great names, I want to shout out to both Cius and Paisley Tree, who are in chat watching. Rocket Powered Zombie, who's on Twitch, said he just got here. Is Ramses' ability getting percent culture for wonder production? Yes, and for buildings. All right. Okay, so we're going to take a break real quick. We are going to go ahead and we are going to show you our first look for our Saharan leaders in just a moment here. But before we go, if you had to pick one leader in Civ who would be a good counter for Ramses, who would you pick, Ed?
I think we've already talked about him with
Qin Shi
Qin
Huang?
Shi Huang.
Yeah, classic.
Because, obviously, in this particular game, Wu gave us a little bit of a hard time about competing with her for wonders, but he's always going to have that agenda. He's always going to see Ramses as a big threat. Those two dueling off in a wonder race, I'm not sure who I would want to put money on because they're both very, very good at it, but, I think those are two natural antagonists.
All right. Well, let's take a minute and let's look at our three leaders of the Sahara, their first look.
Ramses II, Sundiata Keita, and Ptolemaic Cleopatra are the rulers of the Sahara in Sid Meier's Civilization VI. Also known by the Greeks as Ozymandias, Ramses II ruled Egypt for almost 70 years. Ramses' agenda is Ma'at, which influences him to prefer civs that clears and improves tiles in their empires. Ramses' unique leader ability is Abu Simbel, which gives culture equal to 15% of the construction cost when finishing buildings, and 30% when completing wonders. Build your empire along rivers to benefit from Egypt's Itiru ability, and focus building and improving industrial zones to earn extra culture, and great engineers to further boost your culture output. While Ramses II was the arrogance and might of the pharaoh-made flesh, Sundiata Keita just can't wait to be king. Known as the Lion of Mali, Sundiata Keita faced early hardships both politically and physically. At age 18, he returned from exile to defeat the sorcerer king Sumaro Kante. His agenda is Lion of Mali, which influences him to prefer civs that don't compete with him in tourism. Sundiata Keita's unique leader ability is Sogolon, which lowers the gold cost to recruit great people. The market building also gains 2 great writing slots, while great works of writing receive extra gold and production. Focus on faith and gold to grow your empire, as Mali has a permanent penalty to production. Build Sagubas not only for their extra great work slots, but also for their discounts, which combine well with being the suzerain of Ngazargamu or running either the democracy or theology government. While Sundiata Keita began his rule from exile, exile is where Ptolemaic Cleopatra ended hers. Ptolemaic Cleopatra was the queen of Egypt during its final years as a puppet state of the Roman Republic. She was the target of the War of Actium, which created the Roman Empire after the annexation of Egypt. Her agenda is Basilike J, which influences her to prefer civs with high food output. Ptolemaic Cleopatra's unique leader ability is the arrival of Hapi, which grants resources along floodplains extra food and culture, as well as extra appeal on floodplains. Use the extra food and appeal to create high occupancy neighborhoods to work your farms, then leverage the beauty of your empire to entice tourists for a culture victory. Either through power, perseverance, or produce. How will you rule the Sahara in Civilization VI?
Welcome back. Thank you for watching that. We are going to move into the second part of our live stream today, where we're talking about Cleopatra. And we've got a new version of Cleopatra, a new persona for her. We've got Cleopatra. What is this one called? This is the Ptolemaic one. So explain the Ptolemaic dynasty for us.
Sure. We're going to zoom. We're staying in the same area, but we're going to zoom ahead to 1,200 years later and start talking about what happens after Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great moves across the world, and then after his death, things fall apart. He delegates part of his empire to his generals, and Ptolemy is the general who is in charge of Egypt, and it becomes the most prosperous of the successor states to Alexander. So what develops then is a Greek-speaking, Greek-ruled court over an Egyptian
Culture.
Culture and populace. So in a way, Cleopatra here is a perfect candidate for a persona, for an alternate persona here, in that she really had to be both Greek, which is the version that's coming out here and now, and Egyptian, which would be her previous persona. This was an area that then became. We can get into the story in a bit, or shall I do that now?
No, we'll get to it in a bit. Actually, let's jump into the game and let's see what the story is in this game right now. So, Ed, tell us about this amazing start that Sean Wilson from our QA team set you up with here.
Okay, yes, Sean has made my job easy here today for sure. And you can see he's even pinned everything out for me. So I'm sort of just following along his lead. But this is, the kind of ideal start position that you would love to have for any Egyptian game that you're playing, with lots of floodplains. So the yields are abundant. And so we can show people what Cleopatra's new ability is. It's called Arrival of Hapi. You want to explain a little bit of where that name came from, Andrew?
Hapi is the goddess of the flood, of the Nile flood. And this was what causes that area to be so agriculturally productive, and which in turn makes Egypt so important.
So if we look at our start position, we are 20 turns in, but it has not taken us any time at all to develop. Right around our capital, we had 2 of these maize resources. We had a wheat resource. All 3 of those are on floodplain tiles. The deer are not on a floodplain tile, so they are not receiving an extra bonus. But the bonuses we're getting from those first 3 tiles are pretty incredible. You can see the barbarians to our south have realized how fertile and rich our homeland is, so they are trying to take it from us. And actually, we really don't want to we want to make sure they stay off this tile, because this tile is fueling each of our turns here, and we're going to defend that to the death here. And actually, that's what I'm going to do first, is build a slinger or 2 just to give myself some secondary defenses against those barbarians coming up from the south.
So because Cleopatra is one of our rulers for Egypt, and really her ability is about making your tile yields improve quite a bit, she's actually a pretty good ruler, a pretty good persona to take on if you're a new player for Civ, because it makes your existing tiles just that much stronger. Having a 5 food tile 20 turns into the game is pretty fantastic. So we've got a couple of questions. People want to know, why was she included in the game as one of our returning leaders? That she's just compelling. She's just a compelling person to put in the game. Right. I mean, the Ptolemaic world, the world of Alexander's successors with the rise of Rome, that was a dangerous world to be in. And she played that political game as well as she could.
Absolutely. She famously had a relationship with Julius Caesar.
Yes.
Bore him a son. And but it was through taking part in the Roman Civil War, when Caesar kind of takes power, and you see the real end of the Republic, through taking part in that Civil War, that's going to be Ptolemaic Egypt's downfall. Mm-hmm. So she allies with Mark Antony later on during that Civil War, and eventually Augustus Caesar comes in and takes most of Egypt for himself, not for Rome, for himself.
For himself,
which further consolidates Rome as an empire.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I think if you just look at sort of the wonders we typically include in Civ, and now we have Julius Caesar himself coming in with the leader pass, but the Library of Alexandria, the Great Lighthouse, all were created during that Ptolemaic time period. Alexandria became sort of one of the preeminent cities of the world, right up there with Rome. Mm-hmm. So just shine an even brighter light on that time period. I think it's all exciting, good stuff that fits in perfectly well with everything else we're doing in the game.
So we have a gameplay question from Gum Balls. He would like to know: is it correct that the farms will also get tourism after the flight civic is discovered, or the flight tech is discovered?
So that usually comes if there's any kind of culture ability.
Yep, provides tourism after researching flight. There at the bottom of the Sphinx. All right.
But that's for the Sphinx.
Oh, that's for the Sphinx. I apologize.
It's not for the resources along the floodplain.
Gotcha. Okay. And we got another question. This is from Great Knight J on Twitch. Was it Cleopatra who was one of the first Ptolemaic rulers to actually speak Egyptian?
I don't know. I definitely don't want to commit and say yes. Actually, she was the first, because then obviously somebody is going to say, well,
What about
Cleopatra,
Ptolemy, the previous Cleopatra?
923rd, yeah.
Yeah.
but she definitely did. She was able to walk that line between being Egyptian and then being Greek at the same time.
Wasn't there a phenomenal number of languages that she did have some familiarity with it? I think it was at least, 3 or 4 or something like that. I'm not sure. I do remember reading up on her and being super impressed with not only all of her other abilities, but her linguistic abilities as well.
Yeah.
There were a phenomenal number of Ptolemaic queens named Cleopatra too. I mean, the Ptolemies really liked naming themselves after themselves. That was one thing too. So, all right. So Ed, you're going to continue to develop this out. You've got plenty of rivers to move out on as well too. So you could continue along any of those 3 rivers to the west there. The one to the east, you're still going to have plenty of access to floodplains. So this is a civilization that's going to be able to grow pretty tall, pretty fast, right?
Right, and if you look with the wonder that we have completed here, now these amazing tiles are giving us science as well.
Yes.
So we'll have to decide. I'm not sure the Great Bath is going to be a tremendously important play for us, just because the Egyptian civilization already has a bonus that allows them to be safe from floods. So it's a little bit duplicative if you went with Great Bath. So I'm going to probably push the Hanging Gardens here as the next wonder I go for.
I could say you could still build the Great Baths, because you're still going to improve more of your floodplain tiles
and if the floods come through, then you just continue to pick up yields from them as well.
Exactly.
So it's certainly a worthy play. I'm not sure whether, I think let's get the Hanging Gardens done first, I think.
Okay, that sounds good. Anything else about the Ptolemies that we want to let people know about this?
Their marriage practices, or
I think go ahead. This is fun. This is part of the fun part of
Ptolemies oftentimes married sister and brother.
Yeah.
And that was the case with Cleopatra as well. But of course, she had relationships outside of that.
Yeah. It was that kind of time. So, let's pick a civ leader who she would be paired up to go well against. If you had to pick another Civ 6 leader, who should go up against Cleopatra? Ed, who would you pick?
So, I guess we're talking about this persona of Cleopatra.
Sure.
Probably, because the other persona is sort of has a more of a trade emphasis than this one does.
Right.
So I think she is one of those that is just able to exploit the terrain very quickly and get off to a great start. She's very flexible in that, those yields coming off of the floodplains, it's not like all science or something like the Maya are really great at picking up yields off the terrain that are specifically scientific and getting a great start with them. But I think any of those ancient leaders, so Lady Six Guy of the Maya comes to mind as someone who gets off to a really fast start. Those are going to be the ones that are sort of competing in the same battleground that she is.
Gotcha. So she's got an agenda called Basileike Gay, and Andrew, I had to ask you what that actually meant, and you were kind enough to tell me. So.
That's Greek for royal lands. Again, going with the theme of the productivity, both the productivity and profit that comes from the productivity in Egypt, as well as centralized control over that productivity, which becomes important both for the Ptolemaics as well as for when it becomes a Roman province afterwards.
And she likes civilizations that have a high food output, and she doesn't like civilizations that have a low food output. So she's happy to produce a lot of food, and she wants to see you doing that as well too. All right, so we're going to get ready to set up for our third and final civilization. So Ed, why don't you smite these barbarians, because smiting barbarians is perfectly appropriate when you are in the role of an Egyptian pharaoh. You need to be depicted swinging a stick at somebody's head.
There we go. Take another camp. Establish a new outpost on a new river.
Yep, that would be a good. Oh, Candy there. You might even conquer them later on in the game. That's actually a pretty good situated city for you if you
We have
that
to
as well.
look for floodplains, but yes, here are some grassland floodplains with rice resources. So yes, that would be a great tile for us.
Potentially one to conquer as well too. All right, so we're going to get ready to go from Egypt to the opposite corner of the Sahara as we get ready to talk about our third civilization. This is Sundiata Keita, of Mali. And Andrew, Mali. This is a fun civilization to talk about in an interesting part of the world, but all the way on the other side of the Sahara.
Sure, and we're in fact a little bit south of the Sahara, down into areas of the Sahel and the Sudan, not the country Sudan, but the belt that lies underneath the Sahara. Sundiata Keita is the founder of the Malian Empire. This is one of a number of different kingdoms that came up both before and after Mali. He's the ancestor, or he's the predecessor of Mansa Musa, so this is coming in before that. And he's got a very interesting backstory too, which I can go into maybe when there's a moment.
Yeah, let's jump into that in a minute, but first let's take a look at his abilities. So Ed, tell us about how we're going to play Sundiata here.
So in general, the Mali sort of are a civilization that are along the lines, sort of I think the first civilization that we ever created along these lines was all the way back in Civ 5 when we put Venice in, and created a civ that became a superpower just because of their wealth and their ability to purchase things through, through gold. So the Mali work that same way, but here now in Civ 6. And one of the great strengths of them is abilities to pick up gold and other wealth as fast as possible. And that's because they do have a production hit that they take trying to build things sort of the normal way. So if we look at his particular ability, he's going to be able to use gold super effectively to recruit great people, and he has the ability to add great works of writing. You can explain a little bit of the backstory as to why great works of writing are associated with him, but that's going to reward him with even more gold that's going to continue to power this sort of economic engine.
All right, so Andrew, we've actually got a new language being spoken with Sundiata, so tell us about that.
Yeah, so the language is Maninke, and we had an actor, a Malian actor who's a Maninke speaker, which is different from Mansa Musa speaks Arabic.
Right.
And this was a chance for us to take a new language and kind of bring it to your ears as well. And it's also appropriate because it captures this area before Mali really gets keyed into the trans-Saharan trade networks, really gets keyed into the Muslim world. This is the moment before that.
Right. And so for Mansa Musa, because the story of his Hajj is so central to his legend, his myth, and the way that he comes to us through history, it made sense for him to be speaking Arabic, but it's neat to see the native language being reflected in this case as well too. So let's take a look at this situation. Ed, we're going to be trying to roll between great people and gold here in the game. So what's the setup that you've got going for us right now?
So the first thing we want to do is really get our unique district, the Sugaba, up and going. That's a commercial hub replacement. And so when we put markets in place there, if you look at when we were looking at the ability for the leader, we actually get great worker writing slots in the market. So we can continue to, and those works of writing are very, very profitable for us. So we want to fill them as quickly as we can. So what we're trying to do here is get markets up, established in 2 cities, and then start trying to roll through as many great people as we can, specifically great writers, so that we can get those great works of writing that we want.
Fantastic. We've actually got a question from Sukratak on Twitch. Hi, Sukratak. Really curious why the culture focus for Sundiata instead of the militaristic focus, given the content of the Epic of Sundiata. So, Andrew, take it away.
Sure. It's a good question, and we go with the content of the Epic of Sundiata later on. But there are a number of different kingdoms that come up after that. Songhai, for instance, with a much more explicit military focus. In this case, yes, there is this sort of reconquest of Mali. There's the kind of establishment of the kingdom that has some military parts in it. But what you're really doing is creating the legitimacy of rule. And culture in the game oftentimes has to do with technologies of rule, philosophies of rule, which is really what the Epic is about.
Well, why don't you tell people what is the Epic of Sundiata? Because this is a great story.
Yeah. the story goes like this, and it's a story that's told by the Creole, which is the kind of the traditional poets of West Africa, of Mali in particular. So it's a story that was kind of handed down and eventually recorded. And it goes something like this. There's a king of the Mendike people, and he is prophesies that if he marries a woman who is
Not conventionally attractive.
not conventionally attractive, then he would bear a son who would be a great king. So he does this, and he bears Sundiata. Now, over time, this king dies, and Sundiata's half-brother, his older half-brother, takes the throne, and then, of course, exiles Sundiata and his mother, Sogolon, whose name is used for Sundiata's ability there. So they wander in the wastes for a little bit, and are eventually taken in by a neighboring kingdom, and while they're gone, a sorcerer king from a neighboring civilization conquers the Mendike people and sets up a kind of despotic rule. And the people wander the land looking for this prophesized king, for Sundiata. They find him. And he comes back, and he had sort of struggled all his life with infirmity and sort of a physical infirmity. He was unable to walk for years. He eventually finds his strength, famously bending an iron bar as he does, and re-emerges back into the land, retakes the kingdom, and then is crowned Mansa. And he crowned Musa, right? No, Mansa.
No,
right?
Mansa.
Right,
Yeah, you had it
sorry.
right. Yep.
Sorry. He's crowned King of Kings.
Right.
And sets the basis for this empire that will come.
Yeah.
And so that also speaks into kind of why culture there is the focus, as well as reflecting the legacy of the epic itself.
Fantastic. Great answer. All right, Ed, what do we got going on in the game?
So we are rolling with great people. We got a great scientist right away that was sort of just coming our way based on the way the save had been set up. So we got 3 tech boosts out of the great scientists. We just earned a great merchant because we're doing so well at getting markets established and commercial hubs established early. This is a merchant that allows you to go out into a tile and bring copies of that resource back into your empire. So I'm sending him out to the east because we have heard that this fur type of coat or garb might be something to be an interesting addition. We don't have any of them in our kingdom at the moment. We're also working on some wonder building. So we have Petra underway here.
It's almost obligatory if you're playing Mali. You're always looking for a place to put Petra.
And I went ahead and took the ability to buy a great writer using faith. So that's part of Sundiata's abilities. And you notice right away that unusually the market tiles are lighting up as valid places for me to create great works of writing. Typically that would only be the palace at this point in the game. But even here, before we have theater squares, we can get that going.
Right. And you've also started to build the Abandana as well?
Yes.
Okay. So that's going to give you additional slots.
Which is going to give you additional slots for any type of great work. We're going to keep focusing on the works of writing, but we might find some other great works as well.
It might happen. So this is cool. This is a different way to play Mali's usual play style of converting everything to gold and buying it on the marketplace. So you've got another. You're able to recruit Euclid as well too. So continuing to turn the great people. So this is going to be a civilization that kind of runs afoul of Pedro and his desire to see cool people come to Brazil, will he not? So.
Yep.
Do you think that's...
You have answered your own question about who the main competitor here is, I think.
I could make a case for Nubia being a competitor as well too. You're going to be coming at approximately the same sorts of biomes with your start. Nubia rolls up a little
Nubia is
faster.
a great opponent for any of the Saharan
That's
leaders
true.
that we've shown
Yeah.
here. So, and just putting a plug in, if you have not gone and played the Gifts of the Nile scenario that is included in Civ 6, that is a head-to-head 1v1 showdown between Egypt and Nile, and that's also a very, very interesting civilization experience that has a lot of the sort of the history of the various peoples of the region coming and invading Egypt and having to be fought off that Andrew's been talking about, sort of
within the Nile
embedded
Basin.
in that scenario.
Yeah, fantastic. So Mali, preceded by kingdoms, followed by kingdoms like the Songhai. Still a rich part of the culture of West Africa as well too, in terms of the music, storytelling, the epics that come out of it. Just a great civilization overall.
Malian jazz, like present day Malian jazz.
Malian
is
jazz,
fantastic.
yes, the other, I remember when we were putting Civilization, when we were putting Mali in the game the first time. I know people have talked about, we've talked with people about how we do that, and I remember I was working on Gathering Storm when we were adding Mali. We always put up a list of potential rulers for that, and Sundiata Keita was one of the rulers that we were considering, but Mansa Musa was there, and we went with him as well too.
So I think it's actually worth just, I was showing just a second ago, but let's talk about a little bit about the great works of writing here for Sundiata. So +4 gold, +2 production. Production is sort of something that's tough to come by for Mali. So when you actually have a market filled with 2 such great works of writing, you can see, I mean, you're getting the culture and the tourism that you normally get out of such great works, but having the gold and the production, kind of 2 things that are resources that are very valuable to Mali, that's perfect as well.
All right, fantastic. So we could continue to pursue this. Where do you think, oh, sorry, quick question. What is Sundiata Keita's agenda? So apparently he is the Lion of Mali, and he wants this to be a destination civ.
Right, so tourism focus, I think it sort of goes back to the epic poetry written about him and about the kingdom, and the tourism idea is that try to emphasize sort of the great cultural legacy and show that off to the world.
So he might be a potentially interesting opponent as you get later in the game when the tourism really starts to ramp up. You might find yourself running afoul of his agenda later on in the game.
Correct.
All right. So this has been a look at our rulers of the Sahara coming for Civilization VI. Want to remind people that we do have 2 additional packs that we're going to release for Civilization VI. They are the Great Builders and the Rulers of England that will be coming next month. So thanks for tuning into our stream today. I've been your host, Pete Murray. Don't forget to follow Civilization on all of your social media channels. And I want to thank our guests today, Andrew Johnson.
Thanks, Jeff.
Historian for Civilization, and Ed Beach, our lead designer. Ed, all right, thanks for watching. Everybody have a great day.
That's great. That's great. That's great.
Good.
Inek Ramses mire amun. Hasetni b'ersida imba eniru emyibu ten.
Jinek jizet izis hepertesab sen. Jinek Cleopatra hena meset ir. Iu ekshau.
Sundiata Keita le mundeti. De tilobe bola mande ga tambi kuroluga. Ninga dunia belabo.
Ramses II, Sundiata Keita, and Ptolemaic Cleopatra are the rulers of the Sahara in Sid Meier's Civilization VI. Also known by the Greeks as Ozymandias, Ramses II ruled Egypt for almost 70 years. Ramses' agenda is Ma'at, which influences him to prefer sieves that clears and improves tiles in their empires. Ramses' unique leader ability is Abu Simbel, which gives culture equal to 15% of the construction cost when finishing buildings, and 30% when completing wonders. Build your empire along rivers to benefit from Egypt's Itiru ability, and focus building and improving industrial zones to earn extra culture, and great engineers to further boost your culture output. While Ramses II was the arrogance and might of the pharaoh-made flesh, Sundiata Keita just can't wait to be king. Known as the Lion of Mali, Sundiata Keita faced early hardships both politically and physically. At age 18, he returned from exile to defeat the sorcerer king Sumaro Kante. His agenda is Lion of Mali, which influences him to prefer civs that don't compete with him in tourism. Sundiata Keita's unique leader ability is Sogalon, which lowers the gold cost to recruit great people. The market building also gains 2 great writing slots, while great works of writing receive extra gold and production. Focus on faith and gold to grow your empire, as Mali has a permanent penalty to production. Build Sagubas not only for their extra great work slots, but also for their discounts, which combine well with being the suzerain of Ngazargamu or running either the democracy or theology government. While Sundiata Keita began his rule from exile, exile is where Ptolemaic Cleopatra ended hers. Ptolemaic Cleopatra was the queen of Egypt during its final years as a puppet state of the Roman Republic. She was the target of the War of Actium, which created the Roman Empire after the annexation of Egypt. Her agenda is Basilike J, which influences her to prefer civs with high food output. Ptolemaic Cleopatra's unique leader ability is the arrival of Hapi, which grants resources along floodplains extra food and culture, as well as extra appeal on floodplains. Use the extra food and appeal to create high occupancy neighborhoods to work your farms, then leverage the beauty of your empire to entice tourists for a culture victory. Either through power, perseverance, or produce, how will you rule the Sahara in Civilization VI?